Good morning. Welcome to the Treasure Coast Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Stuart, Florida. Today is June 25th, 2023, and I guess you can see because our clock is now fixed, thanks to Judy, that we're starting a little late. Sorry about that. Yay. My name is Deb Harris, and I will be your worship associate today. We are a welcoming congregation. We welcome people of all gender identities, ethnicities, ages, and backgrounds. We're on YouTube also, so hello to those of you joining us via YouTube. For anyone new to be put on our email list or to find out more information about us, you can go to our website at tcuuc.org. And there is a link there to request our online newsletter. And now just a reminder to silence your cell phone if you haven't already. We do have a visitor who I'm not going to have her come up, but I'll have her stand and we can welcome her. Welcome. We're glad you stopped in. Any others? We're glad you're here. Just a few announcements. Most of them are in the printed order of service and in the newsletter that is online on Fridays. Just a reminder that on the first and third Tuesdays at the Stewart's Veterans Memorial Park downtown at noon is always the brown bag lunch, except for July 4th. The picnic is canceled for July 4th. First time ever, according to Janet. But there's so much else going on that day. Also, if you think of it and you have some extra coffee mugs, we could use some mugs in the kitchen. I think we're going to have a lot of mugs. All right, a big thank you to those who helped with today's service. Jackie Robbins and Judy Bajoris, always for our music, our greeters, ushers, our host, Karina Poloni, our tech support, Rachel Valentino, Joanne Leone, and Marguerite Gregory for always providing a wonderful coffee and cookies for us after the service. Dr. William Falk, a former professor, chair, and our current TCUUC board president is in the pulpit today. And now we'll have our prelude. Thank you. Our chalice lighting words are from the UUA Leadership Council. With humility and courage born of our history, we are called as Unitarian Universalists to build the beloved community where all souls are welcome as blessings, and the human family lives whole and reconciled. With this vision in our hearts and minds, we light our chalice. Young children can be incredibly cruel. So can teens, and so can college kids. They can denigrate, exclude, shame, harass, and bully those who are different from themselves. Young children, teens, and college kids can also be incredibly kind, generous, understanding, and supportive of others, even those who are very different from themselves. As a former teacher who's worked with students of all of these ages, I have seen their capacity for cruelty and kindness firsthand. In the first weeks of school, in any classroom, at any level, the biggest challenge facing teachers is figuring out how to create a sense of community with the 20 or 30 individual beings in the room. Students who may speak different languages, have different family structures, come from different racial, economic, or social groups, have different educational backgrounds, gender orientations. Little substantive teaching of any subject matter can take place if students can't get along in and out of the classroom. Most teachers work really hard to encourage students to be their best selves. One mechanism for doing this is SEL, or social emotional learning. You may have heard a lot about that in the news recently. While the term SEL means different things to different people, it generally refers to helping students understand their emotions, show empathy for others, set goals, embrace persistence, and think creatively. It advocates kindness, self-awareness, responsible decision-making, resilience. SEL programs go by different names, but here in Martin County, you may have heard of character counts. That's our version of SEL. According to the American Psychological Association, research shows that SEL leads to positive changes in students' attitudes and values. It's been well documented that SEL has global academic and behavioral benefits, such as improved communication, critical thinking, and higher overall achievement levels, even on standardized tests, for both majority and minority group members. In addition, when students have positive diversity experiences, their interest in improving the lives of people in their wider community increases. The value of SEL probably seems obvious to you, as it would be to most people. And so you might be wondering, why is she talking about this? And who could argue with helping kids grow to be kind people? Unfortunately, teachers everywhere, especially in states like ours, are increasingly under attack, accused of using SEL to push wokeism, CRT, critical race theory, queer theory, and DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which Dr. Bill will be speaking about later in the service. In interviews with Mobs for Liberty spokespeople, which is available on YouTube, you can hear some of these critics saying that teaching children about their own and others' feelings and promoting empathy is liberal indoctrination. a Trojan horse to force-feed CRT to children. The current Florida Education Commissioner was quoted as saying, "SEL is divisive. It has no place in Florida schools." It is now systematically being eliminated in many Florida school districts. Given all the talk about teachers grooming children to be woke, I thought it might be timely to share a story for all ages, which we haven't had for a while, because I believe it captures the message of SEL and DEI at the elementary level and what it's really about. The book is Whoever You Are by the beloved Australian author Mem Fox. You'll note a commonality with our UU principles. Sorry, I have to read from the book. Little one, whoever you are, wherever you are, there are little ones just like you all over the world. Their skin may be different from yours, and their homes may be different from yours. Their schools may be different from yours, and their lands may be different from yours. Their lives may be different from yours, and their words may be very different from yours. But inside, their hearts are just like yours. Whoever they are, wherever they are, all over the world. Their smiles are like yours, and they laugh just like you. Their hurts are like yours, and they cry like you too. Whoever they are, wherever they are, all over the world. Little one, when you are older and when you are grown, you may be different, and they may be different, wherever you are, wherever they are, in this big, wide world. But remember this: joys are the same, and love is the same. Pain is the same, and blood is the same. Smiles are the same, and hearts are just the same, wherever they are, wherever you are, wherever we are, all over the world. And now, if you're comfortable doing so, we'll stand and sing hymn 95, There Is More Love Somewhere. You may be seated. And now we will recite our affirmation, speaking the first verse and singing the second. The words will be up shortly. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the hope of, and to help one another. Now it's time to share our joys and sorrows. If you'd like to share a joy or a sorrow, please step up to the microphone here. Tell us your name first. Janet will hand you a stone to move into our symbolic river of life to mark your joy or sorrow. And as Bob would say, I'll say it for him since he's not here. Please try to keep it personal and brief.
I think this is personal. I'm very, very proud of our congregation. On Tuesday night, there were 5 people from our congregation that went to the Martin County School Board meeting. We talked about book banning. I talked about the need for a procedure to get the books back once they're off. Cindy talked about the school board and ethics, an issue that came up. And Dana and Karen gave a really, really personal and very important discussion about how difficult it was to be a student in the 60s and 70s and not have any books to read about being gay and not have anybody to talk to or to be able to even say who you are. So I was very proud of us. I think it's, UUs are known for their, activities. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Judy Shaloni, and I wanted everybody to say a little prayer for a child who is severely handicapped. And this morning I found out he's back in the hospital, and he's the son of a young man who helps me out every Sunday. He's Guatemalan, and he works really hard, and he told me about this sadness. So say a prayer for him. His name is Caleb Ordonez.
Good morning. I'm Barney Miller-Moore, and excuse me, every morning after I do my morning meditation, I write in my gratitude and on my morning pages. And today I had to write that our 91-year-old cousin Bessie called us. She's Mormon. She was locked in our house in Macon. She didn't have any place to live. She's in transit. So we gave her our house in Macon to live in until things changed for her. But she was locked in the house and couldn't get out. So she called, she was in a panic, and our son, who lives about 2.5 miles away, was able to come, but he couldn't get in either because the screen door was locked. So he had to do some maneuvers to undo the screen door and then to help Bessie out. And so I'm really grateful because at 91, with no supervision there, she's on her own. We were really nervous, but she made it.
Hi, I'm Judy Bajoras, and just very quickly, I want to thank Deb for what she said about teachers. I am a retired school teacher myself, mostly public school, and I just cringe when I hear some of the criticism of teachers and the teacher muzzling that's going on these days. I would not survive in the classroom anymore. I would get fired probably the first day. So thank you so much for that.
Hi, I'm Tia Breeding. I have two joys this morning. One is that I'm having a visit from my dear friend of many years, Miele Adams. She's down from Washington, D.C. area, so we're spending as much time catching up on everything as we can. The second is that last week, David was not in church, David Gray, because he was really ill. And Judith and I got him to the hospital, and he spent the week there, but he got discharged on Thursday afternoon. He's feeling better but frail. She fell on the last day that he was there in the hospital. And so she's recovering also. So they had hoped to come this morning, so I hope that means they're just tired. So I'll check him on afterwards. But he's out of the hospital. She's recovering, so two joys.
Thank you. I'm Jackie Robbins, and I have a joy and a sorrow. The joy is that today I brought back the violin that Janet's grandfather made, and my friend put about $1,200 worth of work into it and charged $300, so I'm thrilled, because he just really wanted to do it right. I guess he's a little OCD. And my sorrow is that I have to not be here on the 16th of July because I have to fly back to Seattle to play a memorial service, celebration of life for a close friend.
I'm Pat Bird. I think a week or two ago, I shared a joy of the things that I had done on a 3-week trip with my son. One of those things was to get him to Rochester, New York to spend a week with his dad, my first husband, who I think I always prefacely say is one of my favorite people in the world. And my sadness is that he's no longer in the world. Last Sunday evening, about 6, he passed away. And I'm just so grateful that I got my son there when I did.
Good morning. You're going to hear me speaking more in just a minute, but I have a joy to share, and that is that for those of you who don't know, last night we hosted the queer prom. And as of Friday, there were 30 kids who were signed up to come to this, and I can't tell you how many came, but I hope there's some good pictures of it because it was decorated beautifully. And I would just tell you very quickly that we had done this a few years ago, and one of the parents of one of the children from that time, that was 2016, I think, took me aside to tell me how for her daughter, this was one of the most significant things that happened when she was in high school. So I'm glad I can tell you that. I think it's a good role we played.
Now, I know that we're not too shy here to share joys and sorrows, but there are always those that are too private to share. So know that our hearts are with you, and Janet is moving a stone for you. The pastoral reading is number 507 from the hymnal. Grant us the ability to find joy and strength, not in the strident call to arms, but in stretching out our arms to grasp our fellow creatures in the striving for truth and justice. And now we'll take just a moment for silent reflection or prayer. We'll sing Spirit of Life. We hum it through the first time and then sing the second time through. Now Tia will pass the plate and we'll take our morning contribution. We thank you in advance for any donation you can give. Thank you very much. We appreciate your contributions. And now we have a music video, keeping with Bob's tradition. It's from a singer named Nemo, who I like quite a lot. It's called Keep Loving, a universal love song, and it fits with our theme today. I hope you enjoy it.
Whether you're different, same ignorant or intelligent, whether you tell the truth, lie or embellish it, whether you live in gratitude or for the hell of it, it doesn't really matter, it's still one single fellowship. Whether you've been lustful or living celibate, whether you're an optimist or only see the negative, whether you're dead broke or rich from inheritance, doesn't really matter, we're made of the same sediment. Whether you got a family or single parenting, or you're Asian, African, European or American, whether you pray to God or atheist is irrelevant, cause what you got inside is the same as all your keep loving. It'll change your heart, it'll change your mind, and then you'll start to change your life. Everything you touch, everyone you see will soon become your family. Do you see yourself in the troubled and the homeless? Can you say everywhere you are is where your home is? Sharing your heart in the dark just like a lotus, letting your light shine bright so you can flow it. Everlasting love of grace like those did Jesus, Muhammad, Krishna, Buddha, and Moses, who carried the weight of the world upon their shoulders. So every time you fall down, go ahead and hold this close to your heart, cause you're a love soldier, and every time you get a chance, you pay it forward. Moving closer to heaven's gates, we're all soaring. Because of you, love is where we're headed. Keep loving, it'll change your heart, it'll change your mind, and then you'll start to change your life. Everything you touch, everyone you see will soon become your family. So keep loving, gotta keep on loving, gotta keep on sharing, gotta keep on trying, gotta keep on caring, gotta keep the light on through dark and despair, gotta spread the love where nobody cares. Gotta keep on loving, gotta keep on sharing, gotta keep on trying, gotta keep on caring, gotta keep the light on through dark and despair. So keep loving, it'll change your heart, it'll change your mind, and then you'll start to change your life. Everything you touch, everyone you see will soon become your family. So keep loving, gotta keep on loving, gotta keep on sharing, gotta keep on trying, gotta keep on caring, gotta keep the light on through dark and despair, gotta spread the love where nobody cares. Gotta keep on loving, gotta keep on sharing, gotta keep on trying, gotta keep on caring, gotta keep the light on through dark and despair. So keep loving, it'll change your heart, it'll change your mind, and then you'll start to change. So keep loving.
Honestly, that makes me feel good to be a Unitarian Universalist. Before I get into my remarks, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself, or some of you may not know, even though a lot of you know me quite well. I wrote my master's thesis on the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, and that was in the late 60s when I wrote that, coming out of having been a student during the, in quotes, civil rights movement. I wrote my doctoral dissertation on school desegregation, and then I wrote a lot about it and was an expert witness on it. And sitting here just reminded me that that's 50 years ago. I never lost my intellectual interest in this. I mean, it sustained me the whole time I was a university professor. I'm still interested in it. And I have to say, I had great hope, and I'm a little disappointed at the pace at which things have gone. But Anyway, and I'm glad you all are here this morning. I was a candidate to be the president of big sociological association at one time, and I didn't win, but a friend of mine who had really hoped I would win said, he told me something I just wanted to share with you in thanking you for being here. He said, if you win, make sure you include in your remarks that clearly the people who don't know you outvoted the ones who do. So clearly the ones who never heard me speak outnumber the ones who do. I'm glad you all are here. So better not wake up. It's wrong to be woke. In case you haven't read the newspaper or seen the news online or watched TV or listened to talk radio, for those of us living in Florida, our governor is doing all he can to protect us. He has been working tirelessly, some would say heroically. What is he protecting us from? Being woke. Or as he says, Florida is where woke comes to die. Oh yes, this is also where the left comes to die, and lest I forget, also cultural Marxism. I'm sure everyone knows what that is. If you think of being awake as being aware, well, maybe being woke isn't such a bad thing. And for you, being woke would seem to be part of our self-identity, so much so that it's part of our 7 principles. As Carol York reminded us last week, ours is a, in quotes, living tradition, as in organic, as in changing over time, or in woke parlance, not forever asleep. This morning, I want to talk a little bit about one particular aspect of being woke, DEI. I know it sounds like a federal agency, but it's not. This is just one acronym or abbreviation of the many in vogue today. It joins some others, such as CRT, LGBTQ+, BLM, and trans. Who knew how terrifying these terms could be? I say terrifying because if you read the paper and or watch the news or follow current political events on social media, these terms appear daily and often in conjunction with local or state legislative action. These actions are nearly always meant to either delimit or punish, or often both. As I said a minute ago, I want to talk this morning specifically about DEI, and then say a little about this with respect to our principles. As I do this, I will draw some on my training and career as a sociologist, 11 years at LSU and nearly 30 at the University of Maryland. In sociology, no concept is more important than norms, expected behaviors. How did DEI become normative? Indeed, what is it? DEI in brief stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. For UUs, these ideals represent things many of us believe should happen. They were important for the kind of society we wanted to experience, that we want to believe in as living up to its very best. A national impetus for giving these things greater attention grew out of the civil rights movement of the 1960s. The racial segregation one found in many American institutions came under increasing scrutiny. Well, this national awakening happened in 1954 with the famous Brown versus Board of Education in Topeka decision. It was not until the late 1960s that the decision was more forcefully implemented, emphasizing that the Supreme Court ruling had included the clause, with all deliberate speed. This led to the school busing era, during which many white people in the South responded with a combination of private schools, often called Christian academies, and moving to the suburbs. This was true to some degree in northern places as well. White flight, as it was called, led to heightened racial segregation in the areas left behind, especially in large urban areas. Sociologists measure urban racial segregation with a statistic called the Gini effect. This calculates how many people would have to move in any geographic area to achieve racial balance equal to the racial makeup of the area being analyzed. A low number being closer to the balance, a large number being further from it. In his book, American Apartheid, Princeton demographer Doug Massey noted that cities such as Baltimore and Detroit were what he called hyper-segregated, places where over 90% of the population would have to move to achieve racial balance. In his book, The Truly Disadvantaged, Harvard sociologist William Julius Wilson, Bill Wilson, wrote about a cycle of poverty in which some urban residents, meaning African Americans at the time, were trapped in a culture of poverty. In other words, poverty for them had become normative. It was all some people knew in their everyday societal existence. It was effects such as these that school desegregation was meant to address, as attorneys might say, to remedy. Aside from redrawing school attendance boundaries, one of the remedial tools was what came to be called affirmative action, a term first used after President Johnson signed the 1964 U.S. Civil Rights Act. In its simplest form, affirmative action was meant to give greater access to societal institutions for all, in quotes, disadvantaged groups, with particular emphasis initially on African Americans. It was to create an opportunity, and in quotes, equal opportunity, one that otherwise was unlikely to exist, or if it did, would produce very limited results. In time, this grew to include a great many other groups. The hope was that emphasizing equal opportunity would eventually yield more equal results. I think we can all agree, excuse me, no matter your political persuasion, this hasn't happened, ergo DEI. DEI initiatives were begun with the best of intentions. Knowing how underrepresented some groups were in higher education, universities took steps to close the gap between underrepresented racial minorities and overrepresented racial majorities. Early on, a running punchline was that the biggest beneficiaries of affirmative action were white women. The point here was that once broadened from a simple racial focus, many other underrepresented groups also got identified. Initially, this broadened our sense of race to include a new emphasis on ethnicity, thus bringing into play such groups as Hispanics, Asians, and Native Americans. Subsequently, racial and ethnic distinctions were further expanded to such distinctions as sexual orientation and physical limitations. Indeed, the American with Disabilities Act recognized that many citizens were denied opportunities because they quite literally could not get in the door. In our lifetime, ramps became a new norm for all public buildings, old and new. Any hope for equal opportunity became buttressed by the need for equal physical access. Along the way, people also formerly hidden from view, gays and lesbians came out of the closet and also began to demand consideration. Indeed, their categorization grew to include people who were bisexual or transgendered or non-binary. And the word queer became embraced not as a pejorative, but as a point of emphatic pride. So today we have the more all-encompassing term LGBTQ+, which I think actually might have another letter or two on it now. They too merited inclusion in the hope of a more diverse social institutional representation with an enhanced likelihood of a more equitable outcome, DEI. but greater opportunities for some, no matter how much one might feel it is warranted, has come at a huge societal price. In recent years, especially, this has been seen by many people, mostly politically conservative, as zero-sum. Greater opportunities for some means fewer opportunities for others. Instead of all boats rising on a rising tide, this position holds that when there is an emphasis on affirmative action assisted by DEI program, the result is winners and losers. The tide rises more for some than others. In the crassest way, in this view, when minorities of any type, but especially racial and ethnic ones, advance, it may be perceived as coming at the cost of whites losing. DEI programs are seen by people who hold this position as creating a new form of discrimination and disadvantage, with whites being the losers. How do we address this perception? Kill the DEI programs. Or as known to Floridians, this is where woke goes to die. DEI programs are especially worrisome for some because to accept what they intend is to be woke. For those less troubled, and indeed accepting what DEI programs hope to accomplish, to be woke is a positive thing, indeed a very positive thing. I take woke as being aware, awake, attentive to what is going on around you, much like the blues musician Leadbelly intended when he first got quoted for having used the term in the 1930s. To people like him, although he intellectually wasn't putting it quite this way, the complex social world is always to some degree in flux, and to think otherwise is to deny reality. I think a lot of conservatives realize this, but what most upsets them is that it changes the social world in ways they simply don't like. They believe these things aren't just wrong, they are morally wrong. This is sympathetic to the notion of the Protestant ethic that salvation will come through individual hard work. In contrast to this, those who see the need for DEI programs value hard work, but want to have people recognize that sometimes your hard work does not get valued as highly as someone else's. Historically, for African Americans, this led to the twice as hard rule. You could achieve as much as someone else, but you had to work twice as hard to do it. In recent years, people working hard with differing outcomes has even become an issue in the UUA. There it was alleged that white men had historically held all important organizational roles, denying opportunities to a more diverse population. This led to some describing these office holders as engaging in quotes, white supremacy. These assertions about the UUA occurred at about the same time as the Black Lives Matter movement. In a kind of revolutionary way, those in power in the UUA resigned, and a new, more racially gender-diverse group of people took over. Last week, Carol York spoke here about the UUA and the push being made for an eighth principle. One specifically emphasizing in quotes, racism and other forms of discrimination. Just as DEI programs upset some, so too this new proposed principle among UUA congregants. What is seen as a necessity by some is seen as unnecessary by others, even bordering on being a personal insult. After all, aren't we a gentle, loving people? Don't we say in our affirmation and spirit of life that we value greatly love and accepting one another? Isn't this emphasized already in our 7 principles? Well, the answer to all of these is undoubtedly yes. Is it enough? Do we need to say more, do more, in the most existential way, be more? Here too, the answer may be yes. It is for you to decide. There is one other aspect to being woke that merits comment: indoctrination. Conservatives worry that this finds its way into school curricula, sometimes overtly, but other times more subtly. The clear implication, no matter how poorly specified, is that indoctrination is bad. It is the leftists and other radicals who are trying to not only expose your children to diverse ideas and the complexity and at times sheer horrors found in history, including and especially U.S. history, but there is an ideological aspect to this. They are telling the children what to believe, and that they should feel badly if their demographic group is the one who discriminated against or oppressed other groups. I think such overt cases are probably quite rare in K to 12 grades, but I'm sure at times in higher education this type of thing goes on. Mostly, I suspect, by noting various forms of discrimination and by implication suggesting that they must be acknowledged, rejected, and replaced by positions being espoused by the speaker. These would be cases where university professors inject their own values into lectures. And just parenthetically, as I would tell graduate students in Maryland's sociology doctoral program, it's not your job to make acolytes. It's your job to make people think critically. So there is one place I know with certainty, absolute certainty, that indoctrination goes on in every American public school. How do I know? Because as a sociologist, I want to understand how cultural norms arise and get learned, and aside from the family, no institution is more powerful than public schools. In his book, Life in Classrooms, Philip Jackson introduced the term the hidden curriculum. This referred to societal values, norms, and beliefs that were not recognized as being part of the official school curriculum. All these things, and I mean quite literally, all are part of school indoctrination, whether intended or not. Sooner than dwell on this, I will provide two quick examples of things we learn early on in school: the Pledge of Allegiance and the National Anthem. Does anyone ever tell you that these are being done as forms of indoctrination? No. But are they? Yes. It's hard to get more explicit than pledging your allegiance to something, especially something that says, with liberty and justice for all, when our history shows over and over how that is more of an ideal than experience for many people. So too the national anthem with its closing phrase, "Land of the Free." But these flaws don't make America a bad place. And learning the pledge and the anthem are important because reciting them is meant to foster a sense of togetherness. One people, e pluribus unum. The pledge, the anthem, and countless everyday taken for granted things in school indoctrinate us into being Americans. That is an important outcome to going to school. And for most of us, no matter how woke we ever get from exposure to ideas and points of view that may criticize these things, at the end of the day, we are still Americans, perhaps prouder in some ways than others. Let me conclude with this. In my 40 years as a university professor, and remember, early 50 years toiling away in the sociological fields, I witnessed firsthand the rise of DEI programs. I was never threatened by them in any way, neither as a professor nor as an administrator. Did I think occasionally that they were doing something with which I disagreed? Yes. But did I ever think that their motives were anything less than honorable, striving to make a college campus a more diverse, equitable, inclusive, welcoming, hospitable place? No. If they were ever accused of overreaching, much is cited recently by politically conservative legislators when some campuses started requiring written acceptance and adherence to DEI aims. My interpretation of this has been that the perceived need for such things grew out of a general concern for the ease with which a blind eye could be turned toward them. That taking things for granted was a poor way to acknowledge and address historic wrongs and would essentially perpetuate the conditions from which these wrongs arose. I'm quite certain that most of us, I'm willing to say all of us, are not MAGA, nor a term I've started seeing lately, ultra MAGA. These forms of political identity seem to be the exact opposite of UU values and beliefs. It is MAGA adherents, many might say worshipers, who are the most strident in their worrying about being woke. For us, on the other hand, I believe in our principles, in our covenant, and deeply held, and in some ways the most spiritual sense of ourselves, to be woke matters. It matters a lot. It is who we are, individually and collectively. Turn now to our last hymn, number 318. Be seated. My closing words come from the back of the hymnal. It's number 576. It's a responsive reading, and I think you know how to do this. I'll read something, you'll read something. If recognizing the interdependence of all life, we strive to build community, the strength we gather will be our salvation. If you are black and I am white, it will not matter. If you are female and I am male, it will not matter. If you are older and I am younger, it will not matter. If you are progressive and I am conservative, it will not matter. If you are straight and I am gay, it will not matter. I've added something here. If you are cisgendered or non-binary, it will not matter. If you are Christian and I am Jewish, it will not matter. If we join spirits as brothers and sisters, the pain of our aloneness will be lessened, and that does matter. In this spirit, we build community and move for restoration. Please remain seated for the postlude. Coffee and conversation will follow in Heston Hall. Well, I talk. So, I had this interest